project here. I don't think I'll do it live in the interest of time, but the one we just did was the simplest library attack, where we put a malicious library in and it loads it and runs it. But we used a really miserable attack, which is a Metasploit default library, which just runs malware as soon as the library loads and freezes at that point. And that is pretty bad. That breaks the process that you're using. So the more cool professional technique is this DIL proxying. And what you do is you're going to do the same kind of thing, but you're going to build a better library. And for that, you need Visual Studio. So you make a working directory to work in, and you get this tool called BGInfo. Now, BGInfo is a program that just displays stuff on the background of the machine. It's a system sysinternals utility. It's not important. It's just a program that has a vulnerability we're going to exploit. So if you view the if you set up so you can watch version.dil in BGInfo here, then you will see that when BGInfo does load this thing called version.dil, and it successfully loads it, so there's a real program called version.dil that's a part of Windows library, and BGInfo loads it. So instead of finding, like we did last time, a library that doesn't exist, we're going to make a proxy DIL that will imitate a library that does exist, and it's going to imitate it well enough to fool this program. So if you use Metasploit and make a malicious DIL and call it version.dil and put it in there, then it won't be fooled. It will refuse to load it because it's able to tell that it's not the proper version.dil, because what happens is it loads it and then it tries to use some of the functions in it, and the functions aren't there. So then it knows this is not the real version.dil, I'm quit. So we have to do better. So what we're going to make is a DIL proxy, and another program, all these things are pre-installed on your Windows machine, I think. You get the DIL export viewer, and this thing will give you a list of all the DILs, all the functions exported from version.dil. And the reason we chose this is because it doesn't have that many functions. See, it has about 14 functions in this library. So to make a malicious DIL that imitates it, we're going to have to duplicate all those functions, and what you can do is just export the function list. And here's the source code that does this. This is code that will make this stuff called pragma. This is the C++ command to make the link to this thing. So what is going to happen is this will export a thing called getFileVersionInfoA. And when anyone calls that function, it will move to something called version_orig, getFileInfoA. So we're going to make a copy of the real version and call it version_orig. And we're going to make another library that just passes all the function calls to the original. So it'll have the same functionality as the original, but we can then add extra malicious functionality to it. And that's what's going to happen here. So what you do is you put in this code. This is the code, you're going to do it in Visual Studio. This is the code that implements the proxy. And here's the malicious code, the exploit code. And what that's going to do is just look for a file called payload.bat and execute it in the command prompt. So it'll do anything you put in that batch file. That's a simple kind of attack. And so you just have to build this file, and you have to compile it in Visual Studio. And in Visual Studio, creating a DIL is a little bit complicated. You create a project, and you have to go to several different menus and set things up right. It's C++, Windows, a library file, and there's a couple of compiler switches you have to set up. In solution properties, these are things that took me a long time to get used to this nonsense. You have to set it to multi-threaded, whatever that is, and set this to all platforms. And you have to set this to not using precompiled headers, whatever they are. That's the combination that works. Then you can build this thing, and now you have a new version.dil, which will proxy to version_orig. And so when you get all that done, you got a much more powerful attack. Now when you restart BGInfo, it will run that malware. The program will actually run correctly because the modified version library has all the functionality of the original one, but it will also run any malicious files you put on the top. So if you put in the payload.bat, something will just create a file on a desktop saying pwn.txt. It'll do that. So you can see that this is a more powerful attack, a little bit more complicated, but you get some practice compiling DILs in Visual Studio. Anyway, yeah.
It's okay because I have Virtual Studio Code.
I don't think that's the same at all. No, I think you got to put on Virtual Studio. But if you're using my pre-made machine, it's already there. Yep, good. Yeah, I don't think VS Code will do it. Maybe. All right, good. That's a good question. All right, so I'm going to stop this recording. I think I've talked all I want to about that.